What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of The Theater Room. I'm going to be talking about WandaVision episode 4. I'm going to be talking about a new movie that just came out on Apple TV, and my wife and I watched this weekend. The Cinema Suite of the Week will be coming later in the episode as well. For right now, WandaVision is like the big talk of the town. It's the big Marvel property that's out, and it's the first thing setting up Phase 4, so I'm going to focus on that more every Tuesday. If you guys want to have these conversations or hear my opinion about WandaVision, please like and subscribe and let me know. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. There's a lot to discuss about this episode. All right, so just getting right into it, leading into this week of WandaVision, I was kind of curious as to what show they were going to parody this week, and I didn't have to worry about it because this week was all about what was going on the outside of the force field or on the outside of the town. This is a perfect example of in Feige we trust. He knows what he's doing. You just got to let him do it. So the first 3 episodes maybe felt a little slow, a little disjointed, or not really connected as much. Besides the little hints that we were getting, there really wasn't enough that really brought the episodes together. And sure enough, this episode we basically recapped the first 3 episodes, but from the outside looking in. So we got all the answers that we wanted to have, and now we're all caught up. So going forward, it's all about giving us new information and letting us kind of catch up with some of the characters. Some of the things that really stood out to me, I loved that they used Monica as a way to show us almost the immediate aftermath of the blip. It was such a cool scene. I didn't know what was happening at first with the dust coming in and then seeing the kind of chaos that was formed by people just appearing. We got kind of a glimpse of that in Spider-Man Far From Home, but this was a real look into the kind of craziness that happened when all those people just appeared out of nowhere. It was kind of sad and scary to see how confusing it must have been for everybody that was still around and didn't get blipped. One thing that I did notice was that when Monica, after the whole blip scene, when they showed her going back to S.W.O.R.D., she made mention, I believe, that it was basically 3 weeks since she's been back from being snapped. So that would put this movie before Spider-Man Far From Home. Because Spider-Man Far From Home, if I remember correctly, was about a year after the blip. So, that'll come into play later when I start getting into my theories, but that's definitely something that we have to keep in mind. This show is officially going to almost explain or make certain things stand out in Spider-Man Far From Home that we didn't see before. So that's kind of a huge thing. I feel like it was a little underplayed, but it's going to come back in a big way. And then speaking of S.W.O.R.D., we now have our official confirmation that S.W.O.R.D. is not an evil entity. They're essentially S.H.I.E.L.D. I like the connection to Monica's mom, who was Captain America or Brie Larson's character's Carol Danvers' best friend from the Captain Marvel movie, which so kind of makes sense that she would have her hand in building this extraterrestrial kind of security force when she dealt with aliens way back when. I think that movie took place in the 90s. So it's a great connection. But for me, the kind of things that stood out in particular were, I feel like there was a lot of breadcrumbs dropped hinting towards the Fantastic Four. First, you got the color scheme of S.W.O.R.D. It was blue, black, gray. I mean, very Fantastic Four-ish. They talked a few times or mentioned a few times about an astronaut program that just didn't seem to be going well. And I believe behind Monica and her boss, when they were having their conversation in his office, you could kind of see almost like a rocket or some sort of missile or something being worked on. I'll get into a little more detail of what I think that means, but it seems like that's going to be the Fantastic Four's connection and way to be introduced into the MCU. For all we know, the Fantastic Four, the scientists, Reed Richards and Sue Storm and all them, could have been already sent on a mission into space in the time between when Monica's mom actually built S.W.O.R.D. or founded S.W.O.R.D. to this moment in the show. But it kind of opens the doorway, makes it nice and easy for them. And to me, that's very on brand for Marvel. They clearly they plan things out way ahead of time. So this could have been something in the works for a long, long time. Some of the things. So last week I talked about Mephisto a lot. If you look online, you see the theories of him being the big bad and being introduced, or at least starting to be introduced in this show. And I feel like we got a couple more hints about that. Just one thing that I noticed, and I could be stretching, but the sheriffs that were stopping Jimmy and Monica from going into town in the Westview sign very clearly said that they're from Eastview. And I was just kind of looking it up online to see if that had anything to do with Mephisto in particular. And I did come across a little fact that in the Satanic Bible, the Devil's Domain is specifically mentioned as East. Their vehicle number was also number 1966. And, the mark of the beast is 666. A 9 is an inverted 6. So could that be like a little subtle hint? A little, foreshadowing? And then also the force field is a hexagon with 6 sides. So the 6 came up again. And they even made it a point to have Jimmy mention why a hexagon. And Marvel doesn't do anything by accident. Everything's on purpose. If he made it a point to show his face saying the word hexagon and questioning it, there's got to be some significance to that. Speaking of Jimmy, everyone noticed, you probably see it all over online right now, that he did the card trick that Scott was doing in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And it's just, a fun bit of continuity. It's a follow-up to some random joke that happened in that movie. Again, very on brand for Marvel. They always follow up their jokes, and they always kind of keep those connections going for a long, long time. So, I wonder, though, if he was looking for a different person. So they never mentioned specifically that he was on the case looking for Wanda. All they said was that he was in the area on a missing persons case, and he needed to enlist some help from SWORD. So for all we know, he's actually looking for someone else. I mean, so we don't know where Scott Lang is at the moment. Obviously, we all believe he's alive, and I know there's another Ant-Man coming out, so it's going to come into play at some point. But I mean, really, he could be trying to get into contact or keeping an eye on anybody who was involved with Ant-Man. So Hawkeye, which we know he's getting his own show later. It could be anybody. It's kind of something to keep an eye on. I think it's something that there's more to it than just he happened to be looking for Wanda. And for all we know, maybe he was looking for Wanda in order to get in contact with somebody else, and that led him to where she is now. Another thing that stood out that I had to actually look up was the CMBR, the Cosmic Microwave Background Radiation. So from what I understand, that's actually a real thing. And it's not a serious thing in the real world, but in the Marvel universe, they made it a point to mention that it predates or goes all the way back to the Big Bang, which basically means it's very old cosmic energy. I'm wondering, there's been a lot of rumors, especially with the Fantastic Four coming to town at some point over the next couple of years, that if this is a subtle kind of hint or a setup for Galactus, not the giant cloud version that we already got in the movies, because that was garbage, but just a new, really well done Marvel version, MCU version of Galactus. In the comics, Galactus eats planets, and for no other reason than he's hungry, for the most part. They obviously would probably tweak it so it almost made a little bit more sense, but in my mind, what if this force field is almost, building that energy, or somehow Wanda manipulating the energy in order to control this town is amplifying that CMBR. Maybe that almost draws more of it to the planet Earth, which is what causes the Fantastic Four or the astronauts to go out and research this field of CMBR that's heading towards the planet, that gives them their powers. And maybe this influx of people infused with the CMBR or pulling the CMBR onto Earth, whatever, almost sends out a signal to Galactus that some cosmic rebalancing needs to be done, and he starts to make his way to Earth. I don't know how they would show that. I'm not sure how they would have a giant floating guy kind of, surfing through space, essentially. But it's a possibility. Marvel did make Ego, the Living Planet, a viable villain, a really well done villain in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. They even gave us, the planet with the face on it. At this point, they can do whatever they want. I'm all in, ready to go anyway. So just kind of something, it kind of gets me a little excited. It's just something that I hope, is true. And if no one else has theorized that, then hopefully I'm the first one. Another thing that stood out to me was the beekeeper. So he ended up being a nobody as far as we know, but it was noticeable that we also don't really know what happened to him after Wanda rewound time. So they clearly left that thread open a little bit, which means they'll come back to it. Hopefully sooner rather than later. But there's not many episodes left of the show, and from what I understand, this is a one and done, one season, and when we move on. So they're gonna have to answer that soon, or sooner rather than later. But I thought that was pretty telling that they didn't show what happened to him. Another thing that stood out, if anyone is like me, just kind of pauses some of the stuff just to kind of see what's going on. On the board for the FBI, they found the identity of a lot of the missing people, but Agnes, they still don't know who that is. They don't have a real name for her, which basically means she doesn't want to be found. She probably doesn't have any records. Maybe if she is playing Agatha from the comics, she's using her witchcraft to protect her identity. Or if some of the theories out there are correct and she's working with Mephisto to control Wanda, then maybe he's helping protect her by blocking her identity or keeping the FBI from finding her. And speaking of Mephisto, one thing that I was curious about is why would Wanda edit the show? Is she somehow in control enough that she knows she's being watched? Or what I think is probably more realistic, that whoever is manipulating her and getting her to create her twins and so on, is aware of everything that's happening and is only allowing the FBI to see whatever this entity wants them to see to make whatever decisions happen in the future. This again leads to my theories more and more, or my thoughts about Mephisto kind of really being the one, or some sort of cosmic entity or multidimensional entity being the one to manipulate things. I feel like it's an easy way in for Doctor Strange to essentially show up at the end of the season and say to Wanda, like, you were doing all this, but he would say, I believe that someone was causing you to do this, and her and him then go into his movie to try and figure out who was causing it. I feel like the bubble energy is causing. So moving on to the theories, actually, my thought right now is that bubble that Wanda is in, that force field, is not just some force field she created or some force field that maybe Mephisto created. I feel like, what if that is tapping into other dimensions and almost pulling information or pulling things out of those dimensions somehow? So, for example, I think it's weird that Vision doesn't really remember where he was or what he was doing before the show started. I don't believe that it's just he's a figment of Wanda's imagination, because the little scene of him in his dead form where he was all gray and white with the hole in his head, to me is a sign that Wanda is fully aware that he's dead, but she's trying to hold on to this vision that she has in front of her by keeping him in the town. So I wonder if somehow she kind of plucked him out of another dimension into this town here. And maybe things like the aesthetic, the different TV shows, the 50s and 60s and all that stuff, the black and white, are all things that are coming from other towns. So she's sort of in control, or she thinks she's in control, because she feels like she's controlling all these little details. But unknowingly, she's kind of pulling these details out of other dimensions, which would kind of play into her possibly taking a couple of pieces of Mephisto's soul and using them to create her children. It's a stretch. I'm trying to, come up with my own little theory here. I'm doing a lot of reading online. But to me, that would also kind of lead into Spider-Man Far From Home. And maybe the big reveal is that J. Jonah Jameson from that movie at the end, if anyone who doesn't know, it was the same actor who played J. Jonah Jameson in the Sam Raimi movies. Schillinger, for anyone who likes Oz. That it's actually the same J. Jonah Jameson. It wasn't just a fan Easter egg for anybody who's watched all the movies to kind of be excited, that it literally is the same guy. And again, Marvel being Marvel, they think of everything ahead of time. It was kind of like a subtle hint that the dimensions are being effed with as we speak, and we just didn't know it yet. So in my mind, maybe this bubble is what starts the rift in dimensions, and suddenly more and more dimensions are colliding and things are just getting all out of whack, which would lead into Doctor Strange, which would also lead into Spider-Man 3, whatever they call that, having multiple Spider-Man from across different movies, multiple villains from across different movies. We talked about that already. I just kind of feel like it would all tie in pretty well if that was the case. I think I think that Wanda, by the end of this show or the end of this season, will have caused so many problems. Again, that Doctor Strange will have to get involved and maybe take her with him, or maybe she'll want to go with him so she can try and, I don't know, maybe end up in another dimension with Vision, or try and figure out a way to undo what's been done. Another thought I had too, this is kind of the last theory I have working right now, is that we don't have any stones. The Infinity Stones are gone now. There was a lot of questions. The Ancient One had said that if the stones are taken away, then we are no longer protected from some of the major evils and major villains or whatever that are going to come and try to attack and take over. I'm wondering if the stones physically were destroyed, but you can't really get rid of those stones because, again, those are just like the CMBR they're basically the beginning of the universe. It's like a power that no one can really control. What if the stones are manifesting themselves within some of the Avengers or some of the heroes or the people that interacted with them throughout the MCU so far? So, Vision with the Mind Stone, maybe the Mind Stone is helping to keep him alive and almost manipulating Wanda somehow to keep him alive as much as she can, because there needs to be a representation of the Mind Stone. I believe she was created using the Space Stone, so maybe that's kind of like she's the new manifestation of that. And maybe one of the plot points for a bunch of the movies going forward is going to be discovering who is the physical manifestation for whatever the power is. So the space, the mind, reality, time, all that kind of stuff. I just, I don't mind if they move away from the Infinity Stones. We obviously dealt with that. We don't need to keep doing it anymore. But, the Ancient One was very clear that is the one thing protecting our reality and our universe. So it almost seems like they can't really be gone. They need to be kind of kept and held accountable and around somewhere. So those are my thoughts. If you have any comments, if you want to, let me know what you think, please, comment below. Next, I wanted to talk about a movie that my wife and I heard, and we saw a trailer for it on Apple TV. And, this movie in particular really kind of hits you if you're a parent. It was called Palmer, and let's get right into that. I'll give you a quick review, let you know what I think. So Palmer, first thing I want to say, Justin Timberlake is the lead actor in this. No one else in the movie was really anyone huge that I've probably seen him before in various things, but nothing really major. And Justin Timberlake doesn't get enough credit. The guy can act. And in this movie, it's a very subdued performance, he kind of underacts a good amount, but not to a point where it doesn't really fit his character. The whole plot of the movie, the whole story is that he just got out of doing 12 years in prison for attempted murder. And, there's a reason. They go into it in details. I won't spoil it for anybody who wants to watch. He comes back to his hometown. He's living with his grandmother. She, on her property, has a pretty big land. She allows a woman to live in her trailer on the land with a son. The son, it looks like he's in like middle school age, but he's not. He's not your quote unquote boy's boy. He's not into sports. He's not into fighting and all that stuff. He likes dolls and princesses. He likes doing makeup and hair. So Justin Timberlake's character, Palmer is his name, is not, he kind of was raised to be more of a man's man, and he at first is reluctant. He doesn't really want to connect with them. He doesn't really want to get connected with anybody. He just wants to get his life back on track. And the movie is essentially him and the boy kind of strike up a bond through reasons that happen throughout the movie. And you can kind of imagine that there's some ups and downs in that relationship. And, the boy's mom is a drug addict. And, I don't remember exactly if she was a hooker, but, she was loose. Let's put it that way. And I don't know, ever since I love the movie. Let me just kind of say that right away. I thought it was a great movie, but it's a tough one to get through. If you're a parent in particular, it was hard. Ever since having my daughter, things just hit differently, and I just don't. It's hard to watch anything when a kid is going through some stuff. And in this movie, I won't spoil it, but there are some tough moments. I was bawling my eyes out. I'm not afraid to say that. My wife was crying. She was definitely crying worse than me, though. But it had a happy ending. But what really kind of hit the two of us is that in the real world, a lot of kids go through what this kid went through, and don't get the happy ending. And it's like, when you think about it like that, it's tough. It was a great movie. It was a very realistic movie, and like I said, Justin Timberlake was, I thought, pretty good in it. The pacing was good. It wasn't too long. It's on Apple TV. Absolutely worth a watch. Just be aware that it's not the easiest watch, especially if you're a parent. So one thing that kind of made Palmer a little easier to watch was the Cinema Suite of the Week, brought to you by my wife. She decided that we were going to have some hot chocolate, and she went all out. Some little hot chocolate shavings, some dark chocolate shavings, I should be specific. It was Ghirardelli, the chocolate squares, with some whipped cream. And then she also put a square of Ghirardelli dark chocolate into the cup. And word to the wise, put the Ghirardelli in there, let it sink into the hot chocolate, and don't even worry about it until you get to the bottom there. Grab a spoon so you can scoop up those pieces of delicious surprise at the end of the drink. It was excellent, and I highly recommend it. I put a picture up for you so you could see what it looked like. It was fantastic. Trust me, it's worth it. And then that was this week's reviews and my thoughts. Sunday I'll be putting up another show for the Sunday show, going over any of the news that's been announced. I know Thor, Love and Thunder, a bunch of new pictures were released on set, so there's a lot to talk about there. There's a lot of kind of random news that I've already seen, and it's only Tuesday, so I'm sure we're gonna have a lot more content drops. And don't be surprised. I don't think it'll be maybe the end of the next episode of WandaVision, but by the end of this season of WandaVision, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get a good amount of new content, new trailers, new information, new release dates. There's so much coming out, and we've really seen very little of it. So don't be surprised if Sunday I have a bunch of announcements for that. Next Tuesday, I'll be talking about WandaVision episode 5. So, please join me. And if I hear any new theories, I'll bring it up then. Otherwise, like and subscribe. Thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next time.